Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got a very, very interesting knife review slash knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Winter Blade Co. Mirage. It is a magnetically assisted pocket knife. The paperwork that I received said that, to his knowledge, it is the first magnetically assisted pocket knife ever. And to my knowledge, that is correct. I don't know. Maybe you guys can tell me, but I've never heard of a magnetically assisted knife. Now, he also has made the Factor, which does use magnets to help deploy, but it's different. This one deploys by pulling a switch and the magnets push the blade out, whereas this one requires you to push it or push the blade into a position where the magnets sort of take over and lock it into place. Very cool. Now, this is the first, this is very different than any other knife. A lot of times I get like a liner lock that's running on washers or bearings, and it's pretty easy to review because other than the shape and a few other little details, it's essentially the same thing. This is not. Right? So you might be wondering, like, dude, didn't you get that like months ago? Why did it take you so long to review it? I really wanted to carry and use this, and really, I didn't take it out and like, tear down a building with it or do all that crap. But I did use it, and I think it's pretty obvious that this thing spent some serious time in the pocket and definitely was used. I'm really happy to say right off the bat, the lock is very strong. The lock is extremely strong, and the knife held up super well. I'm also really happy to say that I did not have to adjust this knife once. The magnets, while I don't work in an environment where there's a lot of metal shavings, the magnets didn't cause a problem for me, but it might cause a problem for you if you work in an environment with, metal dust or metal shavings. So I want to get that out of the way right off the bat. Thanks so much. We're getting into the review before I've got through the intro. Thanks so much to Brian Winters from Winter Blade Co. for providing this pre-production prototype for review. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me, and please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. There is a pre-order for this knife. I will link it right down below. We'll talk about price here in a little bit, but let's go ahead and get measurements and do some size comparisons. Overall length of the Winter Blade Co. Factor is coming in at, my measurement says 7 inches on the dot. Blade length is coming in, it's about 2.75. We can't really, I guess you could come all the way back here. Boy, the tape is wanting to stick to the magnets here, which is a blessing and a curse. I'll talk a little bit more about that. You could measure it to the metal, like the titanium frame, and say 3 inches, but realistically, I think in its longest, it's like 2.85, and then your cutting edge is about 2.75 inches, which is plenty for most people. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons here. Boy, I have everything like tucked away in this little, the NAF's burrito over here to the right. Up against the Ontario Rat Model 1, and let me... This guy out here wasn't totally prepared. The Ontario Rat Model 2. This is closer to the size of the Rat 2, but I've found that, in carry and practice, it feels like a full-size knife. There's a bit more presence to it, so it doesn't quite feel as small as the Rat 2. Let's go ahead and do, let's do the CJRB Pyrite. That's a knife that I feel like I should be using more often in size comparisons. How about up against the Spyderco PM2. Let's put it up against the Demco 80 20.5. It's a little smaller than the Demco 80 20.5. How about up against the Spyderco Para 3? There we go. How many more do we really need to do? I think maybe just a couple more up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue. And then finally, the Benchmade Bug Out. Alrighty. How's the action, right? This is, it operates a little differently. Let me point out here, if you're wondering about disassembly and what the internals look like, Nick Shabazz, as per usual, has done an excellent disassembly video rather than going through that painfully, because let me tell you, it doesn't look super fun to disassemble. I'm going to direct you guys to Nick Shabazz's channel to watch the disassembly if you want to. Nick Shabazz, then you type in Winter Blade Co. Mirage disassembly on YouTube and you're going to find it. I think he's the only one who's done it, right? It shouldn't be that hard to find. Yeah, the action, right, is it's pretty interesting. You can pull down here, and what it does is it allows, I mean, you kind of have to hold the knife horizontally. It says this in the paperwork, right? If you try to hold it straight up, the magnet's quite... I don't know why that's so funny watching it on the camera. It just doesn't quite want to go, right? It does work, like most of the time when I pull this out of my pocket, right, because of the position of the pocket clip, the blade is already angled down, which means the magnet is plenty powerful to get it to deploy, right? Now, some people might call this a gravity knife for that reason, right? Some people might call this a switchblade because you pull and... To me, it feels like a weak assisted knife. And I mean that in kind of a good way and kind of a bad way, right? It's cool because you're pulling down on this little switch here. I think he calls it the M-lock, which again, if you're worried like, oh, it's a magnetic lock, it's going to be a little dinky, little fragile little thing. No! Wow, this thing locks up super solid. It's crazy strong. But pulling the switch back horizontally kind of throws the blade like this. It's kind of a lazy. It is nowhere near the same power as like an automatic knife, right? This is a ProTech. I gotta be honest, it worked just fine. And truthfully, most of the time, I didn't use this. I used this. I used the opening hole, which also works just fine. The power is not so strong that whipping it back into the closed position is difficult, right? So the action's good. It works really well. But it's in this weird in-between spot where I kind of want the magnet. And he pointed out the paperwork so he could manipulate the power of the magnet by, making he could put more powerful magnets in it, right? Which would make opening quicker and snappier, right? Is it more snappy or snappier? I don't know. That's not why you're watching this channel, right? But it would also make closing it a bit more difficult because the magnet strength would keep it from whipping back into position so easily. As it sits, it's pretty easy to do this or the occasional bleh, It works. It works pretty well. And I got to the point, I was throwing this in my pocket a couple times a week for quite a while, months, right? It worked just fine. I find myself wanting it to deploy kind of like I don't know what kind of magnet you'd have to put in there to get it to deploy like a ProTech. I wouldn't expect that, right? But I kind of want it to be a full-on magnetic auto, which I think he's actually working on, or not have it be magnetically assisted and just have it be more manual, which makes it a lot more, more like the Factor, right? Just kind of a weird Factor doppelganger, right? So... And that was one of the things that I had a hard time with reviewing this. I was like, what do I want this to be, right? I want to fairly critique it, but I got to figure out if I like it the way that it is and what I expect it to be, what I want it to be, right? Because we've never had anything like this. So approaching this as a reviewer was kind of difficult, right? But honestly, I think that's where I'm at with it. I kind of want it to be one or the other. This in-between spot is weird and I'm still not quite sure how I feel about it, but it does work very, very well, and you will get used to it. Manipulating it is very, very easy, and the action is good. Let's move on. We're already 8 minutes in. Let's do thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. You can see here it's pretty darn thin. The carbon fiber, technically the liners are carbon fiber, and the titanium combined, really not all that thick. Length and height up against the PM2 and the Para 3. This is not going to be a cumbersome object for most people. It does get fairly tall, but I can't say that it really bothered me. This thing was, truthfully, an absolute joy to carry. I really never had any issues with it. And it carries thin enough that even in something like dress pants, it really wasn't all that bad. I mean, this is something that I really felt like I could carry almost anywhere. Weight, titanium, carbon fiber, and M390 coming in at 3.39 ounces, which is not very much. Not enough for me to be bothered by it. Balance is a little bit back here, right? I can't say you're really going to notice it much. I do that for people who care about balance. I don't think the vast majority of people who watch do, right? But if you wanted to know, then there it is. Disassembly, like I said, I watched Nick Shabazz's disassembly. It doesn't look like a lot of fun, which is one of the downsides to this, right? Very thankful that Nick Shabazz is willing to do that because he provides a service to the knife community that not a lot of us are willing to provide, certainly not me. So I'm very thankful that he did it so that I didn't have to. All of these screws are T6 except for the pivot, right? All these body screws, the pocket clip screws. The pivot's a T8, which is great. That's the easy part. I mean, I wish they were T8, but that's the least of your concerns. Once you're in there, then it's a little bit more of a mess. I don't think it looks like the most difficult knife in the world to disassemble. I don't think it's going to be quite as bad as like disassembling a knife with a coil spring in the pivot like a ProTech or a Microtech. Oh, no way. And I'm talking about the side openers. But it is going to be something that might bother you. So if you feel like, you're the type of person who likes to disassemble things right when you get them, or you're going to have to disassemble them because of your work environment, consider that. It doesn't look very fun to me, right? But I can't speak from experience in that department. I'm just from Nick Shabazz's disassembly. Let's go ahead and measure blade stock thickness. I don't think this is a super duper thick knife. A thick blade. Blade is coming in at 120, it says 123.5, so I'm sure it's 125 thousandths. The blade is excellent slicing. We'll talk more about that. And then we did weight, we did all that, blah, blah, blah. Okay, did we do everything? Yeah. Meat and potatoes time. What an interesting knife. If you don't know anything about Brian Winters or Winter Blade Co., the dude is single-handedly creating, it's not just one or two things. This guy is making a plethora of things that the knife world has never seen. And he's doing it in a way that actually works, right? I love my Factor. The Factor is very cool. It's not like he's just throwing magnets in there, and a lot of people describe his work as gimmicky. These are people who have not handled or used his knives, period. Everybody that I have talked to that has actually received a Factor has pretty much been head over heels for it. Yes, there are some issues and things like that depending on your environment, but these are not just slapped together like, oh look, it's got a magnet in it, neat, right? No, these work. They are well designed, they are durable, right? Capable. The cutting geometry is very good, and they're utilizing premium materials and premium tolerances. This knife functioned extremely well as a day-to-day EDC, and I am very, very happy with it. Ergonomically, it's pretty darn good. There's a couple of sharp edges here or there, but I can't really complain too much. I have carried and used knives that at first glance appear or feel ergonomic, and then in actual use, they end up being kind of a bother. This was not the case. A couple of times I felt myself kind of wanting to slip up here, but not really, right? The carbon fiber gets kind of thin in here and it's kind of angular, and if you're going to use it for long periods of time, it might get kind of pinchy, but not really. The only issue I ever had was sometimes not giving it a good enough whip, right? Just kind of like a lazy whip. Even there I couldn't even do it, and then it wouldn't go back into the position because the magnet kind of stops it, like right here, but that's hardly a complaint, right? And on the rare occasion that for some reason I was trying to deploy it slightly upward, the magnet wouldn't be enough to get it out. But truthfully, after months of use, this thing is still deploying exactly the same way as it did when I got it. It is still centered. Everything is still locking up completely and totally solid. No adjustments. I never had to make an adjustment. I'm really, really happy with that. The magnets in this thing, I know you guys can't see, are just powerful enough to where if you set it on a metal surface, I got a filing cabinet over here, it's not going to be nearly as likely to move. So I found that when I was using it outside in my little roll around kind of tool chest thing, setting it on top of the roll around tool chest dealie, I could move it around and it was not nearly as likely to slide off. I mean, I know people's like, why don't you just put it back in your pocket? Shut up. All right? You shut up. Let me give this example. Moving it around, it would kind of stay there. It's not powerful enough to just stick on the side or stick on the refrigerator or something. The Factor is quite a bit more sticky, and I don't know if that's because there's more magnets in it or what. The Factor's not quite powerful enough to stick on the side of something either, right? And so depending on who you are and what you're doing, this might be slightly beneficial or slightly annoying, right? If you have a bunch of like screws or nails or something laying around and you set this thing beside it, it's possible that something will stick to it, right? I mean, you just pull it back off. I don't know. It really depends on who you are and what you're doing, whether or not that's going to be, a thing, right? The magnets are not powerful enough to really make it an issue or a major benefit. It's just kind of this in-between thing. Cutting, man, yeah, flat ground blade, it just did the job every time, no problem. It was honestly really fun to get this thing out and cut with it. I mean, it was one of those knives where it never really became this like, I gotta get out my tool make, like after a while you carry a knife and you're just used to using it and so you don't really even think about it. Pretty much every time I got this thing out, I was like, look at that. That's pretty cool. Yeah. And that's kind of nice. I like it. I also really enjoyed handing this off to people and having them kind of figure it out and play with it. And people were generally pretty impressed with it. It's always fun to watch people manipulate things like this for the first time. Nobody's ever seen anything like this, so it was weird. It was different. But most people, even people who are not pocket knife people, I hand it off and they figure it out pretty easily, right? It takes 2 or 3 deployments and they're like, yeah, that's pretty cool, right? So that's nice. It's nice to see, people who are not familiar with pocket knives be able to manipulate it pretty easily. This satin finished blade, I would imagine that maybe they'll do different finishes, this or that, but as it sits, it looks pretty good. I just kind of left everything on it, right? I didn't want to, if you clean it off, then everyone goes, that doesn't even look like it's been used, right? Because people don't know what it looks like your knife. When you consider like it bears the scars of 10 years of use because I respect the blade and all of that. Yeah, when you clean it off, for the most part, it looks pretty new, right? So I left it on there just to kind of show, right? And this is M390, which I think the geometry is very good for M390. Also, the edge retention the thing is still razor sharp. In fact, I use this quite a bit, but I bet I could demonstrate even not touching up the blade at all, right? Still totally fine. Still slicing paper after months of use. So I have to imagine this is heat treated pretty well. The opening hole is in the right position. It's very easy. You don't have to dig at it. Very easy to thumb flick, to reverse flick, right? You probably could even, with the assistance of the, can I get the one hand pinky flip? Not really. I'm going to end up slicing myself, right? But yeah, it's very, very easy to manipulate. I appreciate these little details like the carbon fiber on the inside of the pivot. And it's also really cool to have carbon fiber kind of as a liner material, right? I think that's pretty cool. Oh no, there's no lanyard thing. The pocket clip, I think, is very good. It's got a ramp. It's milled, right? You've got a little slot here, which I found was nice for kind of catching my finger and pulling it out of my pocket. Carries relatively deep. No option for lefty. Really, there should be. There should be an option for lefty because I don't find this knife to be any more difficult to manipulate with my left hand. I think it's just fine using that little, pulling down on the M-lock. I am right-handed, so I'm screwing up a little bit. But pulling down on this M-lock here, not really a problem. I also appreciate that he's got a little tiny piece of carbon fiber inside of the nub here, which is sticking up just enough to get it. Just enough. It's not annoying. It's just enough, right? The manufacturer here is Bestech, and Bestech has done an excellent job. Yet another example of Bestech. I mean, they took on something that's not been made before, right? I mean, he made it. He made the first customs here in the United States, and then sent the information over to Bestech to have them produce these so that more people could get a hold of them, because just producing them by himself here in the United States means that we have to pay a lot more money and way, way less people get them, right? So collabing with Bestech and producing way more is a good idea, right? You don't have to buy it. You don't have to. That's up to you, but I think this was a good move. So yeah, Bestech did an excellent job with this. Fit and finish all the way around is very, very good. In and out of the pocket, very easy. I have no issues with that. Lockup, crazy solid. I cannot believe this thing, no matter even trying to muscle it, there is absolutely no way it's going to disengage unless you do something completely and totally outside of the realm of normal or even sane. Normal is not the right word. You have to be outside the realm of sanity to get this thing to disengage. And I mean like putting it in a vise and beating on it with a sledgehammer. That's the only way, right? Outside of that, normal use with a knife or even some, beyond that. I think the blade will break easily before the lock will, right? So the lock solidity, all of that, very good. No stick. I imagine that's because of the surfaces, of the rounded surfaces that actually create the lockup, right? I don't know. Maybe I don't know what the heck I'm talking about. But truthfully, I mean, you can kind of see inside here, kind of, as this goes up. There's, see the little ledge, right? And then, right? This surface of the magnet is slightly rounded. I imagine it's a little flatter in there, but very solid. No issues whatsoever. No lock stick, no play, no pivot lash up and down, extremely smooth in here, no problem. It's heavy enough. I don't know. Can I whip it out? Hold on. I'm going to try and swing it really hard. Oops. Well, I hit the table. I can get it to whip out, right? It takes a pretty decent amount of force, but there's not a lot. It's really just the magnetic detent holding it in, right? I think it's enough. Like I said, centering has always remained exactly perfect. No issues. Nothing there. These came in at, the pre-order price was $360. Wow, that's a lot. But it is very unique. Yes, Bestech makes knives in China, but they are one of the most premium production companies on earth. Yes, you heard me correct. That is true. Bestech is absolutely one of the highest, as far as like precision production goes, especially at this tier. Maybe they're beat out by Riot and there's some other, companies that they may be Maxace, up there. But at this price tier, it's hard to argue. They're clearly capable of doing something like this and getting all the tolerances correctly for something that really, again, has not really been done, right? So would I have liked to see it come in at about 300, maybe 325? Yeah. Can I really get that upset about 360? It's really hard because nobody else is offering anything like this, right? So the price doesn't make me like, wah! It doesn't make me wow. It's the greatest thing I've ever seen. But I think once people have this thing in hand, they're going to be happy with it. I'm going to admit, I don't like it as much as the Factor. The Factor feels like it knows exactly what it is, and it is exactly what it is supposed to be. The Mirage is very cool, and it functions very, very well as an EDC, but it's kind of caught in this weird limbo where it's not quite an auto. It's kind of an assisted knife, and it's kind of a manual knife. It's got a little bit of magnetism in it. It just feels like the little brother, like the older brother is like the super athlete, right? And he's got all the medals and all the trophies. And then the Mirage kind of feels like the little brother who's kind of like, he's also clearly got the same genetic potential, right? He's lean and muscly and he's fast and all of this. He can't quite jump as high as his older brother. He can't quite run as fast as his older brother. His grades aren't quite as good as the older brother, right? No, I wasn't the younger brother. I'm the oldest, right? My younger brother was actually the opposite in my family. If you're wondering if I'm projecting, no. But that's kind of what it feels like, right? It's just like the little brother's still trying to figure out exactly who he is and what he's good at, right? It's good. I think people who pick it up for $360 are going to like it. It doesn't blow me away as much as the Factor. And, that's part of that's the main factor here. Yeah! Sorry. I think had I not reviewed or ever handled the Factor, I probably would have been super enthusiastic about this. The hardest thing for Brian Winters, and this is crazy, but he is his own worst enemy. There is absolutely nobody competing with him. It's literally just him competing with himself. Everything that he releases is going to be, compared with his past models, right? That's it. It's just going to be like people going, well, it's not as good as his this or his that. Nobody's going to be comparing these things with other brands, right? He is literally just competing with himself. So, you got to take that into consideration when people are reviewing these things. They are at least subconsciously comparing it with his other models, right? So, in the grand scheme of things, understand that the Mirage is a very cool, very unique, and very interesting knife that has the benefit of being a great tool. But it's not quite as cool as his Factor, right? So, there you go. I think I covered everything there. Again, really the biggest issue with this is going to be disassembling it. But, it's not going to be for everybody. I'm not going to say everybody needs to rush out and buy this, but those of you who do pick it up, I think you're really going to like it. And God knows what we're in store for in the future with Brian Winters. If this one isn't for you, follow the guy on Instagram and look at his other projects, right? If you want your brain blown apart like an old banana peel with an M80 stuck in it, go follow him on Instagram and just be ready. It's absolutely ridiculous, man. All right, that's going to be pretty much it today. This is going to go in my recommended knives playlist. I honestly do recommend it. Very good. Very happy to be allowed to carry and use one of the first 10 prototypes. That's really cool. Thanks again to Brian Winters. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.